Several years ago, for many of us, our social media feeds were totally overrun by content about minimalism. And many of us were very inspired by empty-looking houses and by the idea of only buying what you need in quantities that you need. When that got old, we started seeing more and more content about slow living. And again, we were so inspired by images of a life without the needless and endless and super draining rush. But the reality was, and the reality is, that many of us could never afford minimalism or slow living, because we're the kind of people who buy toothbrushes in a multi-pack because it's a little bit cheaper. We're the kind of people who have to rush to be able to afford, decent food. And sure, that aesthetic of slow life can be super appealing to many of us. You know, when you spend the whole day running around and then you have so little energy left at the end of the day that you just crash on the couch and want to see something, you don't want to see images of somebody else doing basically what you were doing all day. You want to see something peaceful. You want to dream a little bit, but also not actually do anything because you're too tired to do anything. So yeah, I can see why we are so inspired by this whole idea of slow living. But so much of it is an unattainable illusion for so many of us. We can't necessarily always tell the difference between what's essentially a facade or an illusion of a slow life, an aesthetic, as opposed to an actual attainable lifestyle for someone. We see people going to the market and buying fresh veggies and making beautiful meals out of them at a leisurely pace, while our reality might be trying to make a meal in 15 minutes when everyone's already hungry and tired. And then when we look at content creators who make their own clothes, some of them have been doing it for a very long time, so actually those clothes look great. But then others look like medieval peasant clothes. And that can be an aesthetic in itself, I suppose, but in many workplaces you can't actually wear that. And when they're saying, oh, I'm saving so much money by making my own clothes, what they actually don't tell you is how much fabric and time you're going to spend before you learn to make something that you're not actually embarrassed to wear at work. It takes time and it takes resources to develop those skills. And yeah, you can go and get some old sheets somewhere and practice on them without buying expensive fabric. But again, you need time. And free time is something that a lot of us don't actually have the luxury of having. And I'm not trying to discourage anyone from making their own clothes. I'm actually trying to improve my sewing skills myself. We live in uncertain times and we don't know what tomorrow is going to be like. So it's actually quite worthwhile learning as many useful skills as we can. But my point is that we have to be realistic about what it takes to develop those skills.
And of course, everything I'm saying is just an opinion, so let me know in the comments whether you agree or disagree. But anyway, I think that many of us see this serene sewing, serene cooking, and aspire to live like that. But when we actually try to live that way, it's not necessarily attainable. Because suddenly we realize that sewing an even hem is not straightforward, that sewing patterns skip a lot of details in the instructions, that the sewing machine chews the fabric we paid money for. Suddenly the weekend is almost over, we still have laundry to do, the sewing project is only 20% complete, we're frustrated, and the sewing machine is already in everyone's way. Often we actually lack the skills, resources and setup to effectively pick up a new skill. So we fail to sew successfully, we fail to learn a new valuable skill, and we fail to achieve what looks like a simple back-to-basics lifestyle. And then we go and watch more content on how someone else apparently manages to do it with grace and happiness. In the meantime, the cost of living is going up and we don't know what tomorrow's going to be like. But instead of focusing on how we can best prepare for uncertainty, we sometimes get mentally stuck in a fantasy version of a comfortable life. I'm sure there are plenty of people in the world who live a super slow life at a leisurely pace, just like there are people who are buying designer clothes every day, just like there are real minimalists. But of course, not everything you see online is real. Not everything you see is a complete picture of someone's life, and not everything is necessarily achievable for everyone. So if we get too stuck daydreaming, is it distracting us from achieving real things? Most of us got quite good at recognizing fake wealth, beauty filters, fake beauty, but I feel we're not quite as good sometimes at recognizing fake slow living and fake serenity. Not all, but quite a lot of the slow living content we're seeing is still a very polished, romanticized version of a simple life. I'm not saying that slow living is bad. I'm just saying that if it inspires you, do consider if the particular content you're looking at shows a real lifestyle, an aesthetic, or a fantasy that's making us feel bad about our own lifestyles. And if it's just an aesthetic or a fantasy, are we sure that's how we want to spend our time? Let me know what you think in the comments, and please like and subscribe.